Chapter 1. The Harbinger's Awakening. The wind howled through the frozen peaks of Vhar'Kanoth, a land where even the sun dared not linger. The night stretched eternal in this season, blanketing the jagged tundra in endless twilight. It was here, in this forsaken expanse, that something long buried began to stir. The people of Dranmire, the last bastion before the great ice fields, had seen the signs. The sky bled red for 7 nights. The glaciers groaned as if whispering forgotten names. And then, the disappearances began. First, a lone hunter failing to return from the wastes. Then, an entire caravan swallowed by the snow, leaving behind only frozen footprints that led nowhere. By the time the ironclad sentinels arrived, the air itself had changed. It carried a weight, an oppressive hum that gnawed at the bones. Captain Elric Vayne, a man who had faced the horrors of war and lived to tell the tale, found himself gripping the hilt of his blade more than usual. "Captain," said Sergeant Rhine, his voice muffled by the thick fur lining his collar. "You feel that?" Elric nodded. "The air's wrong." The Sentinels, 7 in total, stood at the edge of a great fissure that had not been there the night before. Its jagged maw cut deep into the earth, pulsating with a faint crimson glow. Warm air, thick with the scent of something ancient, rose from within. Elric took a cautious step forward, peering into the abyss. "Light the torches," he commanded. Rhine struck flint to steel, and soon the ravine was cast in flickering orange. What lay below sent a chill up Elric's spine. A structure half buried in ice. A massive door of blackened stone, covered in runes that pulsed like dying embers. This was no natural formation. "Gods preserve us," whispered one of the younger soldiers. "What is this place?" No one answered. A sudden gust of wind roared through the chasm, carrying with it a sound not of this world, a whisper, layered with voices both young and old, distant yet painfully near. "It wakes." The torches flickered violently. The ice at their feet cracked. Elric turned sharply. "We need to." The ground collapsed beneath them. The world tilted, and then there was only falling. The depths of the lost. Elric's world returned in flashes. A deafening ring in his ears. A bitter cold seeping into his bones. Somewhere above, the sky was a distant memory, obscured by towering walls of obsidian ice. Groaning, he pushed himself up. His torch was gone. His sword, half buried in the snow, glinted in the faint red light that pulsed from the cavern walls. "Rhine," he called out. His voice echoed strangely, bending as if the walls themselves were listening. A cough, then a groan. "Here," came Rhine's voice, hoarse but alive. Elric staggered toward the sound. His second-in-command was pinned beneath a slab of ice, his fur-lined cloak torn and dusted with frost. Elric heaved, muscles straining against the weight, and managed to roll the slab away. Rhine sat up, wincing. "Captain, where the hell are we?" Elric scanned their surroundings. The chamber stretched impossibly wide, its walls etched with symbols that shifted when he tried to focus on them. At the far end stood the black door, now uncovered, its runes burning with renewed life. The others had begun to stir. 3 of the sentinels had survived the fall. 2 lay still, their bodies twisted unnaturally. Elric clenched his jaw. "We're leaving," he said. No one argued. But as they turned, the door groaned. A deep, shuddering sound reverberated through the chamber, shaking the ice and rattling the bones in their chests. The runes flared to life, brighter than before. Then it moved. Not by force of wind or quaking earth, but by something unseen. The black stone peeled away, layer by layer, revealing a void beyond voids, a darkness that was not simply absence, but hunger. And from within, something stepped forward. Tall, wrapped in flowing chains of obsidian, its face a swirling mask of shadows. No features, save for 2 smoldering eyes, deep as dying stars. The air thickened, pressing against their lungs, their minds. A whisper curled through the silence, sinking into their very thoughts. The veil is torn. The harbinger walks once more. Then, the torches died. And the screaming began. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Forgotten. Darkness. Not the absence of light, but something deeper. Something alive. Elric's ears rang with the echoes of his men's screams, brief, swallowed by the abyss. His lungs burned, his limbs numb from the icy grasp of the cavern. He tried to move, to reach for his sword, but something unseen pressed down on him, like a great unseen weight forcing him to kneel. The air was thick with whispers. The veil is torn. The harbinger wakes. Fingers of shadow crawled across the chamber, tendrils weaving through the frost, snuffing out the last flickers of torchlight. Shapes shifted at the edges of his vision. Figures? No, not figures. Echoes. A presence loomed before him, vast and ancient, its form only half seen, shifting between flesh, smoke, and void. Those smoldering eyes, twin stars on the brink of collapse, fixed on him. Then, the whispers faded. Silence. Elric gasped as the pressure lifted. He fell forward, his hands sinking into the snow. His breath came in ragged gasps, but he was alive. A voice, deep and without mercy, spoke. You are not of the blood, yet you stand before me. Elric forced himself to look up. The harbinger, if that was what it was, remained motionless, yet the air around it throbbed with unseen power. What are you? Elric managed. His own voice felt small, swallowed by the void. A pause. The entity's chains rattled softly. A question from one who does not remember. The runes along the cavern walls flared brighter. Images swirled within them, visions of another time. A battlefield of ice, warriors clad in silver, standing against a being wreathed in shadow. A blade of light, striking true. A prison of frost, sealed with blood. Then, the vision shattered. You were meant to forget. Elric's chest tightened. These images, why did they feel familiar? Footsteps crunched behind him. Captain, Rhine's voice, breathless, panicked. Elric turned to see Rhine and two remaining sentinels, Orin and Merrick, still standing, their eyes wide with terror. But they weren't looking at him. They were looking at the others. The fallen sentinels, the ones who had perished in the fall. They were standing again. Elric's blood ran cold. Their eyes were empty. Their faces slack, yet something moved behind their gaze, something watching from within their skin. Then, the whispers returned. We wake. The dead lunged. Elric barely had time to react before one of them, a man he had fought beside for years, slammed into him, skeletal fingers clawing at his throat. He threw himself backward, rolling through the frost, his hand finally finding the hilt of his blade. The steel sang as it left its scabbard. The revenant lunged again. This time, Elric did not hesitate. He drove his sword through its chest, straight to the hilt. The body shuddered. Then it let out a sound, not a scream, not a groan, but a sigh of relief. As if something inside it had been waiting for release. Then it collapsed. Orin and Merrick had drawn their weapons as well, steel flashing as they cut down what had once been their comrades. Rhine, his breathing ragged, turned back to the harbinger, raising his sword with shaking hands. What have you done? The entity did not move. Not I, it said, but the hunger that follows. Then, the ice began to crack beneath them. The cavern shuddered, tremors rippling through the frost. The walls pulsed, the blackened runes splitting apart, revealing more of the void beyond. A great, hollow howl rose from the depths, a sound that did not belong in this world. Elric didn't wait. Run! The survivors sprinted, their boots slipping on the unstable ice. The cave was collapsing, the ceiling groaning as massive shards of frozen stone crashed down around them. The howling grew louder, closer. Something was rising from below. They reached the passage leading upward, a spiraling path of jagged stone, slick with frost. They ran, the tunnel shaking, shadows chasing them. The whispers had become screams, voices of 1,000 souls clawing at the veil. Elric could feel it. The Harbinger had been only the first. Something worse was coming. The light of the surface pierced the dark, the exit was near. They burst from the cave into the open tundra just as the ground beneath them caved in completely. A deep roar erupted from the abyss, and for a moment, the sky itself darkened. Then, silence. The four men stood at the edge of the ruined expanse, chests heaving, breath curling in the freezing air. Rhine was the first to speak. "Captain, what in the god's name was that?" Elric sheathed his sword, but his grip did not loosen. "I don't know." He turned back toward Dranmire, toward the world they had left behind. "But we need to warn them."